the hardest thing to overcome is that when you stop being an individual contributor, you don't feel like a contributor at all. And then you become a manager. A lot of new managers will they'll struggle with that. They'll struggle with the idea of just letting go and letting somebody else be the person that gets it done. So I manage managers now. I'm an engineering director, and I always say to new engineering managers, like, the most important thing is to become a force multiplier. I'm not judging you as a manager on the work that you do. I'm judging you as a manager on how you get the most out of the engineers who are doing the thing.
Welcome back to Neuroconversion Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication, especially in the STEM workplace. My name's Jeremy Doran, and I love to help great engineers become great leaders. Today, we have a great example of that, James Charlesworth. James, welcome.
Hello.
It is great to have you. Where are we talking to you from?
I'm in Sheffield in the United Kingdom. So Sheffield, not many people know it, but it's famous for steel and the Arctic monkeys.
Oh, perfect. All right, then. Good shout out to them. Can you explain to everyone a little bit about what it is that you do, what your role is now?
Yeah, so I'm a director of engineering at a company called Pendo, which is a software experience management platform. Pendo combines product analytics with in-app guides, feedback, and more recently, agent analytics to help companies like build better software experiences. Now, our core users of Pendo are product managers, but I obviously come from the engineering side. So a big part of my role is creating an alignment between software engineers and their product managers. And a lot of that comes down to communication and collaboration, which is what I'm excited to talk about.
So you seem like a perfect fit for this show. So glad to have you here. You talked about helping with that communication. What are some of the issues that you see and help overcome?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with product managers and engineers communicating is that often, like, they have different motivations and they're almost like two different kinds of people, right? So product managers, for example, they thrive on like ambiguity. They love discovery. They love it when nothing's really defined and they have to kind of like explore and find the solution. Engineers, on the other hand, like hate ambiguity. Engineers like things to be defined. They like things to be well planned out and stuff like that. So being able to find a middle ground where people who are used to having really structured, unambiguous work can work with people who quite like things to just be a little bit loose and kind of discover as you go. So yeah, a big part of what I do is trying to find harmony between those two approaches.
So what are some things that you do? Do you build like loose structures to keep, both sides somewhat happy, or what is your strategy?
Yeah, I think the big thing that has worked in the past is if you say to everybody as a group, for the next 10, 20 minutes, we're just going to be doing discovery and we're just going to throw away all the rules and we're just going to see what we can come up with. We're going to come up with ideas. And then after that, we're going to try and be predictable. So after that, everybody in the room has to sit down and try and write a plan. Even if writing a plan down isn't the most exciting thing for you, it is for some people in the room. So I think, splitting it like that is really, really important because it gives a bit of structure and it gives everybody the ability to do both things, and then they can empathize with the other person as well.
I love it. And you're setting a time frame for it so people know there's an end in sight. I was recently listening to a podcast and it was talking about being an entrepreneur. They're like, the problem with being an entrepreneur is not that you're in a dark cave. It's that you don't know how long the cave is. If you know you're only going to be in the cave for 20 minutes or a mile or whatever it is, you can live with that. But when you just don't know when it's going to end, it can make you go batty. So I think putting a time frame on that is brilliant.
That's a really, really interesting way of thinking about software engineering in general, because like I've always encouraged software engineers to do exploratory work. Do you know about the explore-exploit trade-off? So the best systems work when you're spending a little bit of time exploring new things and then a little bit of your time or most of your time exploiting what's already working. If you ever listen to Rory Sutherland, he talks a lot about the bees. They have a waggle dance that they do when they find a source of nectar. And so all the other bees can go after that source of nectar. But some bees in that hive know not to go after that source of nectar and they know to continue looking around. And you need to be able to do that in software engineering. And I think what you said is really, really important because if you're going to be doing exploratory work, you need to have a time frame when that ends. You can't just do unlimited exploration. You need to at some point say, okay, we've learned, we've put in a time box on this. What have we learned? Let's go back and let's go and try and exploit this and get something out of it.
And knowing when to stop
Yeah.
is always a challenge. So you see it with artists, like there's always one more brushstroke they want to do, or with, analysts, there's always a little bit more data. And at some point you just have to say, it's going to have to be good enough, and we will deal with the things we missed when they come up.
Yeah, perfection is the enemy of done. That's what they say. If
Yeah.
you're striving for perfection, you will never reach perfection. You always have higher standards than anybody else is going to put on something you've created. And if you try and strive to make yourself feel like it's perfect, you'll never get it done. It's just not worth it.
A friend of mine recently said something which I thought was brilliant. She said, I've given up on perfectionism and I've ratcheted it down to excellentism. I'm like, all right. She's like, as long as it's excellent, that will still satisfy me. I'm like, good enough.
Yeah, it is difficult though, because perfectionism is, I mean, it's almost like it's a character flaw. It's one of these things that everybody has it in some way. Some people are more perfectionist than others. And it's something that you really just need to identify is a weakness. They say that it's okay. The worst thing in the world is having blind spots, right? So it's okay to have weaknesses, and it's okay to have things like, if you're a bit of a perfectionist, that's okay, as long as you're aware of it, because you're never going to be able to counteract it. You're never going to put in measures in your own mind to stop it happening if you don't know you're doing it. So the most important thing is to accept that that's something that you do. And then, I like the idea of framing it as excellentism, because
Yeah, it's not the things you don't know that get you. It's the things you don't know that you don't know that
absolutely.
get you. So wonderful. So your role now is, you said, director of engineering?
Yeah, I'm an engineering director. So I started as a software engineer, and I was a tech lead, and I've done the kind of traditional route into engineering leadership. I worked at a startup, and working at a startup lets you try everything. And, I was the first software engineer at a startup. So what happens then is, if the startup starts to grow, then all of the other software engineers that come on, I'm kind of mentoring and tutoring them, and then I ended up becoming their manager. So I went into engineering leadership because there were a bunch of new engineers that I was the best person to manage them. And so that's how I got into engineering management. And then I realized I liked engineering management. So I've been doing that for sort of 6 or 7 years now. Yeah.
Great. Not everyone likes that transition. And for everybody, it's a challenge, especially for engineers. So tell me about the transition from, being a contributor to being a manager, and what were some of the hurdles you had to overcome?
I mean, I think you've just said it with the word contributor. The hardest thing to overcome is that when you stop being an individual contributor, you don't feel like a contributor at all. You are a contributor, but the idea of, engineers more than anybody like that feeling of, I've got something done. Like, I've left the day and that was done. That was merged. Or, we'll talk more about definition of done if you want, because it's very different in a product-led engineering team, but you've done something. And then you become a manager. A lot of new managers will, they'll struggle with that. They'll struggle with the idea of just letting go and letting somebody else be the person that gets it done. So I manage managers now. I'm an engineering director, and I always say to new engineering managers, like, the most important thing is to become a force multiplier. I'm not judging you as a manager on the work that you do. I'm judging you as a manager on how you get the most out of the engineers who are doing the thing. So, you do get a lot of engineering managers that will still write code, and that's fine. You can still write code if you want. But nobody's judging you on the code you've written. They're judging you on the code that the people who report to you have written. And it's really, really difficult to make that transition mentally, I think, more than anything.
It is. It's something I address every time I'm doing coaching of newer managers. And the way I like to put it is, in the past, your product was, a drawing or calculations or whatever your thing was. Your product is now your team. That's what you have to take pride in. You have to take pride in how good of a team you have, and not a thing. It's people are your product now.
Yeah, that's a really, really important concept when it comes to hiring. So I always tell somebody, if I've got an engineer manager who's a first-time hiring manager, so they're hiring for the first time, you really need to remind people that your job as a hiring manager is to hire people that are smarter than you and that can do things that you can't do. Ideally, you want to hire people that can do things that nobody on your team can do. So you build up a kind of really diverse set of skills. But the most important thing is to hire people that you will be happy to let them take the lead on something and let them do it, knowing that you're there to support them, you're there to coach them, you're there to be their manager, essentially. But you need to hire people that you respect as better than you. Like, every senior engineer that reports to me is a better software engineer than me. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard someone say recently, if you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's hard when you're hiring and or managing. So you talked about the need for diversity, which is crucial because it takes all the different viewpoints to get a thing done. But it's hard to appreciate when people are very different from you. So there's a lot of neurodivergence within engineering fields. And if, you know, someone is very different than you, it's hard to appreciate those strengths sometimes. Are there any things you do to make sure that you help appreciate strengths that are very different than yours?
That's a really difficult thing. So candidates going for jobs usually hate multiple steps in the interview process. They would like to do one interview because it's nervous to do an interview. But the reason you have multiple stages in an interview is so that they speak to lots of different people. And so if you have a diverse interviewing team, then you're much, much more likely for one person to pick up on, as you just said, pick up on something that the other interviewer didn't see as a strength. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot when we're hiring. If I'm hiring with, so for example, we'll hire with an engineering manager and then a product manager as well, and they'll both do an interview. And product managers pick up on totally different things to engineering managers. So then you reconvene. You say, okay, this person was actually really strong at this, and I hadn't realized, and that's great. So I know it doesn't really answer your question. It's a bit of a cop out on what I can do, but it's what we can do as a hiring team. I think that's the most important thing. You need diversity in a hiring team for that very reason.
That's great. Do you bring someone from, say, HR in?
Occasionally, I mean, somebody from the people team will usually do the initial screening, but we will do cross-functional interviews, and we have a sort of hybrid in-office culture. So people will usually come into the office and they'll spend some time with our office experience people and stuff like that. So yeah, like we don't do a formal interview with HR, but we do have recruitment people interviewing them, and we do have people from HR speaking to them, which is really important. Because obviously, if you work in human resources or you work in a people team, your whole job is people. Your whole job is understanding and listening to people. So yeah, you need those people involved.
Yeah, the points of view. So I've got an engineering background, but I'm a member of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Managers.
Okay.
And the way I view things and the way they view things work well together, but are very, very different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're almost about as opposite as you can get, really. I'd say sales is closer to engineering than it is to human resources. So yeah,
it's funny. So you made that first transition into being a manager, and then when did you become a manager of managers?
A couple of years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago. That was really because somebody left the company. It's not like we grew into it. So that came quite suddenly. And that's tricky because there's two paths into growth in your career ladder. And one of them is when the company's growing or new roles appear. And so you can go for one of those new roles. But another one is when somebody leaves that's above you. And that's what happened to me. And that happens extremely suddenly because somebody hands a notice in and then suddenly everybody turns around and says, well, you can do their job for a bit and see how you get on. And yeah, so that happened quite suddenly. I didn't have a huge amount of time to prepare. And it is difficult because you're working alongside other engineering managers as their peer. And then overnight you become their manager. I guess that's a bit similar to how you could be an engineer working alongside other engineers and then suddenly you're their manager. It's exactly the same transition. It's very difficult each time.
So in addition to that, going from peer to manager, what was the difference in the transition from going from individual contributor to manager and then manager to manager of managers?
The biggest difference is the managers that I was then managing have been through that transition themselves when they became managers. So they sort of know what to expect and they've got a lot of, maturity and things like that to understand that, yeah, this is fine. I'm actually there to help you. So yeah.
Great. One thing that is another challenge for new managers is delegation.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can remember one of the first times you tried delegating and how it went. Is there a story there?
I mean, the first time I tried delegating, I was an IC, I was a software engineer. And it was one of these things where it was at a startup and I was trying to be a full stack software engineer. So I was trying to do back end and front end and infrastructure and a bit of product management and a bit of talking to customers and things. And then we hired a full front end engineer who was an expert at front end engineering, but didn't know the code base. And so there was a moment where I just had to say, okay, there's only so much I can explain the code base. I would like you to just go and do whatever you want and try and get it to work, right? Like, it was really difficult having somebody, like, I had built the whole front end by that point because we had been such a small company when I joined, to just hand like ownership over this code I'd written, and I'd review the person's code, but it was basically delegating the ownership of the code base to somebody. And that's one of the hardest things to delegate, is ownership of something that you feel. If it's a new piece of work that's coming in, so somebody will come along to me and they'll ask me to put together a slide deck or something. That's relatively easy to delegate because this is new work. So I can say to somebody, okay, we've been asked to do this slide deck. You're probably better placed for doing this. I'm not being lazy, but you are probably better placed to do this. You have the data. Can you do that slide deck? But if it's something that I'd already created that slide deck and then I wanted to delegate somebody to add an extra slide, that's really difficult because you feel like you own it. And so you feel like you're giving up something that you've created, and that's much, much harder than delegating new work.
So the three things that I always say stop people from delegating is I can do it better, I can do it faster, I care more than anyone else.
Yeah, I would say usually the third one is the biggest one.
The third one is your issue?
Yeah, because especially if it's something you've created, you really care about it.
I also heard, I'm going to keep saying things that other people have said because I like listening to other people. She was talking about, it was educational design and letting someone else take a class that you've been teaching and putting it into an online format. She said, it's like handing your child over to a stranger on the holidays. I'm like, oof, yep, that's hard.
Yeah. Have you ever written a book with a publisher, like a copy editor? Like, you put so much effort into writing a book and then you send it off to the publisher and they just cover it in yellow pen in PDF, and you're like, oh God, but I knew what I was trying to say, and now I've forgotten what I was trying to say, but I don't want to dismiss what you tried to. Oh yeah, it is really, really, really hard.
I'm going through that process right now, and honestly, almost fired the editor. I'm like, we are not on the same page, and I'm happy to report that we are now very much on the same page, and it's going swimmingly. But I think some writers want the editors to just take over and do it and finish it and not be involved. And I think some people like us want to stay involved and keep it our thing. And she just had to figure out which one of those I was.
Well, that's maybe the first thing that you said when you listed those three things that are hardest about delegation. The first thing is, I think I can do it better. And everybody has a little bit of that. We like to think that we have humility and we're humble and we can give away control, but everybody is a little bit in the back of their mind thinking, I could probably do this better. And it's so counterproductive to have that attitude. It's really, really difficult to break it. Obviously, it's easier to said than done to just not care as much as you do, but it's the feeling of, if I just spent an hour on this, I could do it better than this person's doing. It's really difficult. I used to be in a band for a long time and I play guitar and drums, and I'm okay at guitar and drums, but I was in a band with a drummer who I just thought wasn't as good a drummer as me. It's this whole thing of, is he the best drummer in the world? No, he's not even the best drummer in my band, right? And that was really, really, really hard when he wouldn't play the drum beat the way that I would have played it. It was really, really difficult to just back down and say, okay, that's not the way I would have done it. I probably would have done it differently, but you go ahead the way you want to do it and bite your lip and just go with it, because it's really disempowering. Like, when we started doing this, I would literally walk behind the drum kit and shove this person off of the drum stool and just do it and show him, like, this is how it should go. It should go like this. And that was horrible of me, and I shouldn't have done that, because that's not going to help the person feel included in the band. Eventually you have to just accept that other people have their own ways of doing things, and it doesn't mean it's better or worse. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's difficult.
And, you said that it was very difficult because it was the thing that you had created. It was your baby. But you have to remember, someone taught you, you know, and someone had to give up the control, and now it's your baby. Someone else is going to make it their baby. You have to trust that'll happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually another thing about starting to manage managers, is that when I started to manage managers, I gave up some of my direct reports to become skit levels of my new manager. And that's just the same as giving up access to a code or, a drum beat or something, because I felt like I was really coaching these people and we were halfway through their career progression and I was going to put them up for promotion. And then suddenly I love doing that kind of stuff, right? Like, I love coaching people and I love promoting people and seeing them grow in their careers. And you're halfway through that process and you say, well, this person's your manager now and they're going to continue. And that's really hard. That is really difficult. So yeah, it happens at all levels, I think.
And because delegation is so hard and people struggle with it, are there things you do to teach your reports how to be better at delegating?
Yeah, that is difficult. The most important thing is framing. It's to ask them the questions like you've just asked. Okay, so you can't just say to somebody, "You need to get better at delegating." You need to ask questions like, "Why have you not asked somebody else to do this? What is it that's stopping you doing that?" And then let them talk it through in their own words, and then let them realize in their own words. A lot of people will solve their own problems as they start talking about their problem. And so if you say to somebody, is there a reason why you're doing these 5 things and haven't delegated to somebody? So it's not an accusatory question. It's not, why haven't you delegated this? It's, is there a reason why you're doing all these things? And they will often just say, they'll start to go into an explanation. And as they're doing the explanation, they will realize themselves, without you having to really ask, that there are better people that can do those. Yeah.
Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Yeah. Delegation for managers can sometimes be tricky if you feel like you're protecting engineers' time. And so I spend a lot of my time, and I always used to pride myself as an engineer manager that I would protect engineers' time. I wouldn't have them in meetings that they shouldn't be in. I wouldn't ask them to do menial stuff. I wouldn't ask them to report on stuff. Like, I was protecting their time so that they could get on with software engineering. So sometimes delegation feels like I'm doing this person a favor, but usually you're hiding behind that explanation. Usually it is one of the 3 things that you've just listed, and you're hiding behind this idea that, I'm protecting their time. You're not. You're protecting your own control of that thing. So yeah, it is difficult.
One thing that normally is what it takes to get people to start delegating is the idea that you're not delegating to save your own time. You're delegating to teach that person and to let them grow. The best way you can train them and get them to grow is by delegating and giving them power over, a process or a project or whatever it is. And once that clicks, it makes it a lot easier for people to do it.
That's a really, really important point. I do this sometimes with senior engineers as I'm trying to create visibility. So I lead our Sheffield office at Pendo, and it's one of the smaller remote sites. And we suffer from an issue that a lot of people that might work on a remote site of a larger company suffer from, which is visibility of the work that gets done. So I have senior engineers who are brilliant, and everybody in our office knows who they are, and everyone knows the work they do, but they don't necessarily get to shout about it. So I will often find opportunities for those people to almost brag about their work, be boastful about their work, which can sometimes, that's delegation basically, right? So if somebody has to present something to our chief technical officer, I will have one of those engineers do it as a way of giving them a bit of visibility, and they will see it as a waste of their time initially. They'll be like, you're just delegating this because you can't be bothered to do it. Like, it's not that. It's for you. It's so that you can stand up in front of people that you don't speak to very often, that make big decisions in a company. You can put your name out there and show what you've done, I think.
Out of curiosity, how comfortable are they? How much of it is they don't want to, quote unquote, waste the time, and how much of it is I'm terrified of getting up in front of people?
I would never put somebody into a meeting if they were actually terrified of doing it. It's really important not to force people into that kind of situation, I think. So no, they usually are just making excuses because it's a new thing and new things are difficult. But yeah, it's a challenge because some people want opportunities, or it's like jumping out of a plane with a parachute on, right? You can stand at the edge of the door and the wind's rushing past, and you know that if you jumped, it will be great and you will love it. But there's also part of you that thinks, I could just stand in this doorway until the plane lands. And so that, sometimes you do need to give people a little bit of a push to make them take that jump. But obviously you don't want to push too hard. And sometimes it is okay to just stay in the back of the plane until it lands. There's no shame in that. It'll take off again, right? Like, it is a tricky thing. Like, in the past, I've made mistakes where I've pushed people slightly too hard, or I've not pushed people hard enough. It's very, very difficult. I'm always, asking for feedback. I'm always asking people, am I helping you here? Am I actually, is this, do you think this will be good for you? And yeah, I've got it wrong in the past, absolutely, but I try.
That's all we can do. And just asking. It's so funny how difficult it is for people to ask, like, how did that go? Was that okay? What could I have done better? But you just get so much information when you ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let people speak as well. Like, asking questions is a really, really difficult skill. It's one of the most important skills of managers, is being able to ask questions that get you answers that are useful and get people to actually think about the answers. So, you can't just say to somebody, did you enjoy that? Was that good? That's not a question. You need to ask those, what was it about you? How did that make you feel? What, reflecting on the situation, how would you describe that? What your experience with it? That's a much better question than did you like that?
It's interesting. I recently did a podcast about delegation because I'm learning to use AI. I'm not good at it, but I'm getting there. And one thing that I'd heard is, you give it context, you tell it its role, and then you have it interview you and ask you questions and then give it a task to do. And I found that when you ask someone, like, do you have any questions? They're going to say no. If you say, ask me 3 questions, they'll come up with 3 questions. They're there. They don't want to ask them. So either, like you said, asking them very specific pointed questions or forcing them to ask you multiple questions will get a lot of information out.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of touching on just the general nature of people that are a bit more introverted and not always offering their opinions. Is it usually that's a solvable problem? You can create a framework, you can create a structure that makes people feel comfortable, asking questions and putting things together. And so if you do that, a lot of the time, it's not the fault of the person who doesn't want to offer information or ask questions. It's the fault of the situation that they're in, and you can change the situation like you've just described. You can ask ChatGPT and see how that goes first. So, yeah.
So what are some strategies you use to build a framework for introverted people to share their ideas?
So at Pendo, we are hybrid, which means we do a lot of our interviews face to face in the office. The whole time during the pandemic, we really hired for people that wanted to come into the office one day. So we don't do that many like large meetings on Zoom if we can help it. And I think it makes a huge difference if you're trying to solve this problem in person or if you're trying to solve it on Zoom. There's a whole different set of problems there to solve. You have a massive advantage if you're having face-to-face meetings with people, which is that if you have people that are relatively good emotional intelligence and they're good at reading people, you can see just by somebody's body language that they are, they're ready to say something, or perhaps they're not feeling included. It's so much easier to do that in person than it is to do that on a Zoom call. I'm sure we've all been in that situation on a conference call where we've really had something to say, but your box never goes yellow and everybody else's boxes go yellow and you just feel frustrated. I found that face-to-face, that can be solved a lot easier because it's much more obvious to look around the room and you can see what people are. But obviously there are disadvantages as well to having everybody face to face, in person. Some people just aren't super comfortable with things like small talk, which is usually to be discouraged, because if you have loud people that just want to sit there and have a conversation for 10 minutes about something that's not related to the topic, that by its definition will exclude people and it will make people feel less included in the group. So, small talk tends to happen a lot more in person than it does on conference calls. So one of the disadvantages of face-to-face meetings is you will end up, the meeting will start 10 minutes beforehand or it will go on 10 minutes afterwards. And so creating a lot more structure around it is much more difficult. But by and large, I know this is a very long answer to your question, but to answer your question about what kind of frameworks and structures you can put in place, having a facilitator that is experienced in facilitating meetings, that people feel included in, and people feel confident having their opinions heard in, is the most important thing you can do. Like every big meeting should have a facilitator. It doesn't have to be somebody whose role is facilitator. You don't necessarily need a scrum master. It can be an engineer. It can be a product manager. But every meeting should have one person who is there to make sure that there's not small talk happening. It's making sure that if somebody is quite clearly trying to say something, that they do get heard, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very difficult to be running a meeting and facilitating it.
Yeah.
And having an outsider who's able to not have to present anything, just be looking around and seeing when something's not working. I've had clients hire me to just watch a conversation between the two of them. Because they're like, we have these conversations and we think we're clear and we come out and we have totally different ideas. Can you just watch and see what's happening? And they were happy to pay me for an hour. I only pointed at them one time. I'm like, no, you did not respond to his actual question. I don't think you understood it. Can you go back over it? They're like, oh my God, that was so useful. But yeah outside observers
can
pick up a lot.
Yeah, recording meetings. And these days you get AI summaries and things from meetings. And so it's tempting to just read the AI summary. But if you're just reading a summary of a meeting or you're reading some notes afterwards, you don't get the experience of actually seeing how it went and you don't get to learn from it. Because you can learn a lot from watching other people. It's probably the best way to learn. And so just watching a meeting that you're not even part of and seeing how people are doing facilitation is really important. I think I would encourage anybody that wants to get into a kind of leadership type role and wants to find themselves facilitating meetings in the future to just sit there in meetings and try and do that. Try and see what's going on. Try and identify moments where you would step in if you needed to.
And it's not as easy to do, but if you can do it without being able to hear what's going on and just physically watch, it teaches you how much information there's there without hearing the words that are being said.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds difficult, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's good experience. So we're going to need to start wrapping up. Are there any topics that you're hoping to get to that I have not gotten to yet?
I'm a big believer that the responsibility of being understood is on the person doing the communicating, not on the person listening. And that's very, very uncomfortable for some people when they first realize that. But if somebody isn't understanding what you're saying, it's not their fault. You sort of need to take a bit of ownership and change the way you're explaining it. That happens a lot with engineers. It happens with engineers where they are trying to explain something that's quite technical and they get very, very frustrated that the other person doesn't understand the technical details behind it. And they'll just keep explaining it over and over again and then get really, really frustrated. And they'll just like, oh, this person just doesn't get it. No, they don't get it. You need to change the way you're explaining it. Like it's really, it's really hard to make that shift, but it is not somebody's fault if they don't understand what you're saying.
I like to say that it's 100% the responsibility of both people. And I heard a long, long time ago, someone talked about marriage. I wasn't married yet at the time. And he said, people say that marriage is a 50-50, exchange. It's not. It's 100-100 because sometimes one spouse has nothing to give to the relationship. They're just totally tapped out and one person has to completely carry it. And sometimes it goes the other way. And I feel that way about communication. If everyone looks at it as 100% their responsibility, it's going to happen. The communication will happen if the person listening doesn't understand and they stop and ask questions to get that understanding, that'll do it. Or if the other person who's the one communicating checks in to make sure they're being understood. So I think everyone should take 100% responsibility. And then with 200% responsibility, it's going to have to go well.
Counterpoint to that then, how about everybody takes 80% responsibility and then the third person whose job is the facilitator takes 20%? Because as we spoke about before, if you haven't got the right structure for the communication and for the conversation to happen, it's doomed to fail. And so sometimes you do need a third person to come in and change things up and change the way that this communication is being delivered. Take it onto Slack, take it into a document, make it asynchronous. Like you need somebody sometimes to come along and do that. So yeah, I realize
I like it. So it's not just the 80-20 rule, it's the 80-80-20 rule.
Exactly.
Brand new thing. It's perfect. All right. If people want to reach out, learn more about you or get in touch, how would they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, James Charlesworth. I'm on LinkedIn fairly regularly. I also have a YouTube channel, Trains Code on YouTube. I talk about coding tutorials and sometimes career advice as well. So you can subscribe on there.
Nice. And then final question is, what is one piece of communication advice we can all benefit from?
Active listening. Listening, conversation is not about taking it in turns to talk. It's about taking it in turns to listen. And I think one of the most valuable things that I ever, if you go on these training courses, one of the most valuable training course that I ever went on as a manager was an active listening training course where you learn that when you're sat in a room and you're waiting for your turn to talk, you're not actually contributing anything. You need to be listening to other people. So active listening is, that's what I would say. Learn how to do it, practice it. It's a skill. You can build it up. Do it.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you, share this episode with one person on your team who might benefit from it. And if you're leading a technical team and want to explore how these communication principles could work in your organization, visit www.neuroconversionleadership.com to learn more. And there you can reach out to schedule an appointment. I'd be happy to talk through what might be going on in your world. See you next week.